We're back again for another one of our episodes on a conversation about the new normal. It's been a joy that you've allowed us to be with you as you've been discovering what it looks like for you to live a new normal. And so I'm back again. My name is Tony. This is Shane and Christian, as always, and we're back to discussing some more things. And tonight I'm excited about the context of our conversation because. We've been talking
because there is. Oh, okay.
Oh yeah.
There's no context there.
So, but we've been talking a lot about the what's new in kind of our individual lives and dealing with some things and okay, what are we going to take from this and what do we learn and how could we prepare differently and instead of having those discussions tonight, what I'd like to talk about is more of a broad stroke, especially as it relates to the church. So like the new normal for the church. As you guys know, we have been doing live stream services for, I don't even know how many weeks now. Maybe 8 or something like that. It's been maybe longer than that.
10.
10 weeks, okay. Yeah, so 10 weeks not being in person with one another. And so I wanted to just ask you kind of from the jump, how has that been? Just watching a TV screen as your source of spiritual feeding.
It's strange, for sure. It's strange. I think a lot of us now, like, if you're really curious, you could literally get online and there's so much information and there's so many preachers and so much pastors that happen on church. So I think I'm accustomed in general to going online and like studying or like reading some commentary on the scripture or something along those lines. But it's definitely weird. Like I think for us, for the first few weeks, we actually set up like the laptop on the coffee table, and then like literally while communion was happening, we went and like I grabbed the Wonder Bread and I toasted it, and we did that, and that was cool. And then we did grape juice. It was cool but weird. But you know, we've taken it in stride. I think as always, the thing that's always missing is really the conversations. I think something awesome, like some of my best conversations ever, like the ones that I really enjoy the most, is in the car post sermon with my wife. Like, hey, what'd you think? Because there's always something, it's always off the wall. It's just never what I ever anticipate. And it's always amazing. It's always something. And so I think it's really evidence to the idea that God has made us all really different. And he's really speaking to each individual through his word. It's live. And we really serve each other well being together so we can have those conversations about how a particular word is moving us closer to our destiny, which is looking like Jesus.
That just reminds me of what we were kind of talking about the other day, in that the fellowship afterwards, participating, having the feedback, all that kind of stuff is what builds on, like, it's almost like the sermon is just like the seeding of these, you know, into each individual person for it to like kind of flourish and just kind of, you know, build on itself in the congregation. Yeah,
it's kind of like a catalyst for conversation or something like that. It's a catalyst for talk more, but when it's like only a one-way street, it gets a little bit difficult. I've mentioned so much about what I've been thinking about it, but I also just kind of wanted to get your feedback on what if the church from this point forward has to be planted online. Like, what if we're not coming back to the building? Like, no, we hope that that's not the case, but what if that's the case? Like, we don't have the interaction Sunday morning, you know, or the Wednesday night or whatever, small group. Like, what if we don't have that? What if it has to be planted? Like, what does that do to us and our thinking, and it's kind of breaking some of the barriers of our preconceived notions?
Yeah, I mean, that's a scary idea because even like, so I think churches, like, we all have a picture of like what that looks like the singing and like, you know, the building. And even as I think backwards historically through church, like, it's happening in someone's house, like it's happening in a gathering. So the idea at first is scary. And then I think, like, you know, there's a lot of opportunity, I think, that also is kind of enlightened by the situation. Like, I could absolutely see small groups and via Zoom where they're live and you can have these conversations with people. There was a text in James, and there's a text, I think it's in Proverbs, and it says, he who seeks, like, not the word privacy, but he who seeks his own way is doing wrong. And so the concept is, like, you know, the idea of, if I'm going to have sin that's going to grow and flourish in my life, it's going to have to grow in secret from people who love me and care about me and want to see Jesus fleshed out in me. And so I think it's very strange, but like, as a trainer, like, I know, like, if I'm reaching out to a client, I'm texting them and I don't hear back from them and they're missing workouts, that the reason is the moment I get them on the phone, we're going to have a conversation that they know they need to have, and then they're going to end up like, okay, and they'll end up back where they need to be. So what if I couldn't? What if it only was up to your willpower at 4 a.m. to get up and put your clothes on and drive to the gym? That's a scary thought, right? Because we know that we are prone to stray in that way, as well as we are to actually applying these things and not becoming information suckers that don't find ways to then make commitments and make change among people who can hold you accountable to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that would definitely be an obstacle, and I think it would shake things up for our cultural norms that have been in place for so long. But shaking things up, I mean, the church, I guess you should say, God always does well with that.
Yeah, totally.
And so it would be very discouraging at the beginning, but then I think if we all, maybe a sermon series in, just kind of setting everybody right, would give everybody the heart to get on board. And it just makes us, we all have to be more accountable, kind of, in a way of what you're alluding to, that it makes it easy to hide. You got to be a little more deliberate about certain things, and maybe you have to overcome some hurdles of learning to use technology and, reaching out to people. Like it's great when you can go in there and just see everybody's face and be like, I'm coming to you, or something like that. But then it's like, you call on somebody. It's
really interesting, because I don't know if there's I've been thinking about this a lot, but if you wanted to give up on faith and you were thinking about it a lot before the coronavirus, this was your perfect opportunity.
Wow.
Yeah. This was your moment to go, all right, I have faded into the background. I have faded into the darkness.
But then at the same thing, like it's also the kind of situation where you're going to find emptiness real fast. And potentially.
Right.
You might come right back to God. You might be like, holy cow, I need him.
What may have happened, right, is the prodigal son happens in one verse.
That's exactly right.
As opposed to taking the whole chapter, or the whole half a chapter.
Right.
It's like, and it's over. Right. And I'm back. I was gone for 1 week, but I'm back next week.
I didn't know you were gone yet.
I didn't even know you were
right.
That's
awesome.
Cool.
That's really good.
I think that's you mentioned the struggles, but also kind of the opportunity.
Yeah.
That there's an opportunity in this, and so I guess that's another question. We've been having this dialogue about men specifically, and about trying to figure out why the church seems to have more women than men. What's that about, and what is it about this maybe opportunity that we have that maybe can shift some of that? Anybody want to dive into that deep pool?
It's very right. It's very interesting to me. The most fun personal devotional Bible study that I've done all year this year, and I'm still in the middle of it, is I really wanted to sit down and figure out how does God and God's truth, how does Jesus exemplify masculinity in a divine way? What are the divine attributes that I would say those are that's Jesus projecting how to be a man in the context of Jesus is perfectly rested in God, perfectly dependent, and then powerful and firm. This is going to sound strange, but one of the most masculine, at least in my interpretation, things that Jesus ever said is, I did not come to bring peace, but I came to bring a sword, right? Yeah. And it's this idea of being free from the fear of man and from needing to fit into any cultural norm, and saying I have the kind of relationship with God and myself that there's so much clarity about who I am, that I know I'm going to rub some of you the wrong way. And I think the other end of that too, in terms of what it looks like when that starts to degrade, what it looks like when we as men get too changed by the culture, is the other verse. There's a verse, I think it's in John, where Jesus is not going down to the festival. His brothers are saying, hey, we know you do these works. Why don't you do them in the middle of town so people can see you? You have a really ineffective way of doing works, be it here where no one can see them, right? Exactly right. And Jesus said, this world hates me because I, in all that I do, testify that it's evil. But it can't hate you because you don't. You belong here. You're in that. And so for me, it's this idea of saying, okay, it's important to draw a line and say, wait, hold on. I want to have my masculinity defined by God in such a way that I'm so clear about who I am and what I'm about, that in some context with some people who I love, I'm going to bring a sword, and it's going to be some discomfort that should be there because that's me being who I am regardless of the external pressure. And then in other places, whatever is appropriate.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, that passage that you're talking about, the second passage where I think he says, you do not believe because you accept the praise of man.
Right.
Right. Like your issue, your issue is that you love people. You don't love people too much, but you make their praise into something that becomes more valuable to you than your relationship with God.
Yes.
And man, boom,
that's just big.
But Jesus is savage. Jesus is intense. Jesus is hardcore. He is not holding a lamb, peace on earth, goodwill of men. There's an intensity about Jesus where, he's driven up just before he moves to Capernaum. He's driven up in Nazareth to a mountaintop, and they're trying to push him off the cliff, and he just walks through the crowd. He's like, "Get at me!"
Are you kidding?
What is it? So I guess what is missing from the conversation that people don't or
maybe
that
it's
men
just
don't see that.
Perspective. You think about our cultural masculinity, it would be, self-sufficiency, independence, strength, no emotion, all those kind of things. And you don't think of that when you think of the church, and that's along the same question you're asking. And so you're not going to be necessarily drawn to this. But we're also in this the millennial and this other kind of culture that's emerging. It's like being in touch with your emotions, and then more of a feminine masculinity or something. And you were saying identifying what masculinity is in a conversation we were having, almost being able to just make a woman happy, your mother, a girlfriend, your wife, whatever it is. So now it has these emotional things, but it's funny because that independence and stuff, it's almost like Jesus embodies that because he's so independent of the world, but so dependent on God.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But when we see him, we would almost see that cultural strength, just because he's kind of carves his own path, beats to his own drum. So it's this weird thing. But then when we're called into the church, we're also called into dependence and community and expressing your emotions and all these things, which he also did.
Yeah, totally.
So it's I think, here's the thing, I think if you found a really strong Christian leader, he still fits the mold of a cultural Christianity, a cultural masculinity almost, because he separates himself from the world as independent and strong and all these things. The church isn't seen like that, but the church produces that.
It's good. Yeah, I think it related to that is this idea that Jesus is sort of above the fray, like you're saying that, he's so independent from what the world teaches. But he is in touch with emotions. In John chapter 11, there's that famous passage where Jesus weeps at the sight of his friend Lazarus' death. He goes, "Wow, I feel this for them. I mourn for them." And whatever the world wants to, I think there's a crushing, it seems like, and this is just my opinion, but there's a crushing in the spirit that guys are supposed to be tough and bold and courageous and go after things and shake it up and decide to flip over some tables and to build a cord and whip out money changers and that's toxic masculinity or whatever, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And I don't want to dive into kind of a whole political discussion. That's not really the point, but there's something that for whatever reason that the world wants to keep that away. That's scary, but what in fact I think it's comforting and it's powerful and it's wonderful. And I think if the church could continue to explore that more, maybe it would be an opportunity, even in the midst of all that we're going on with our new normal, of going, and maybe that's a shift that needs to happen with us. Okay, we were, I don't know, I don't mean to say that we were feminine, because we were feminine and masculine. We have amazing brothers. We just heard a testimony from Joe. That's a
awesome.
man. So I don't know. This. I'm also trying to walk on eggshells here.
Right.
I think dodging some landmines.
Right.
Yeah.
There was a really interesting part of the interview actually that I watched today and it seems unbelievably appropriate when he talks about the idea of not being able to play basketball again, right? And then it speaks and so it's while you were talking, it kind of resonated with me, how big of a deal that is to us as men, right? And just how naturally we like to compete, right? And it's not necessarily in a vindictive or an evil way, but we strive, we're strivers. And for me, I think as we kind of have spoke about, we know Jesus is independent, right? And he has views that are really, I guess, strong, maybe the word.
Has an understatement.
Yeah, right? Because like I think of Revelations, he said, I prefer that you were cold, but since you were lukewarm, I'll spit you out of my mouth. Like Jesus is like, I demand your passion or don't have anything to do with me. And like, so he's such a polarizing being that you can't, there's no fence with Jesus. Like Jesus is all in on everything he does. Or like in Daniel, like one of the things that resonates with me in terms of like as a man is, it says I saw one like a son of man whose eyes were a flame of fire, right? Like just the concept of intensity. Like what would it look like if you were 100% all into everything that you did? And there was no like sort of, like you were just 100% all in, your principles were completely clear. And you were like, or even in Hebrews, I talked about this with my wife, like it says that Jesus opened the curtain through the curtain of his flesh. Like, what if you were, as men, we were so clear about what we stood for that we were saying, I'm gonna walk out of the world before I turn my back on these principles. Like I'm gonna open these opportunities like in love for people through the curtain of my flesh. And like, I think that's one of those things that I think is attractive to what I believe is masculine in me. It's clarity, it's commitment. And I think it's interesting because I think one of the experiences I had in being married is this idea of saying, like there's a difference between, like when we talk about independence, it's this idea of saying, I'm not what you want me to be every moment of the day, right? And so I remember like, having disagreements with people who I love, but being able to walk away with some of those disagreements saying, there will be a point where you're happy to have that kind of person in the room, right? You may not like having the Bible opened to you in a moment where maybe you're not in a season where you're ready for that kind of accountability and someone speaks the truth and love to you and you might walk away from that conversation angry, but at some point it's going to land on you that that person loves me. And I think that's kind of how I view the sword, like where it's important to say like, I'm committed to being loving to you at any cost because that's what I am to you. And we may have seasons where that's going to create some friction because we're all human. But you're going to walk away. You should walk away from those conversations and make, man, like I'm really glad that that person loves me and they're firm in those really trustable qualities. Because I know when I call this person, I know what if I call Tony, I know what I'm going to get from Tony. Like I don't have to wonder if today he's kind of lukewarm on the Bible thing and he's not going to tell me the truth. I can hear his words, I can take his criticisms, I can disagree with them, but I can take them and say, I know they're coming from a loving place. And that clarity is really where trustability comes from. And I think that serves people more than agreement.
That's good. So I guess in the context of a new normal discussion, like if we believe that the new normal of the church should be a shining a light on maybe the opposite side of the coin of revealing kind of the more masculine nature, what do you think are some of the things that could be done or could be thought through within the context of the church to be more masculine?
That's hard to say, especially that feels like the kind of thing that takes a lot of thought and preparation.
And you've had
and
15 seconds.
We explicitly did this with no.
Well, I think it's always about just breaking down what people think, right? Like what people's perspective is and what's in reality. But really, to do that, you just have to get in front of people. And I think it's a willingness to get in front of people, which right now is hard. So it's finding how do we do that and just have men be the ones doing it. If we're trying to reach men or something like that, go to where they're at. And right now, I don't know what that is. So
gardening.
At home. Gardening,
right. So.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting conversation because I think, and this is it's so interesting because it's hard to talk about anything masculine without there being some cultural undergird. But like if we let's say we all went away on an island with our Bible and like we just forgot everything we knew except what was in Genesis to Revelation about manhood, right? Like what would we come back with? Well, the first thing is it says like you as a man have a particular relationship and responsibility before God. So like one of the most what do you call it when you feel terribly guilty after you read something in the gospel that's true? The most convicting things that I heard all year was I was reading and I was reading a commentary on Genesis when God comes back after they ate the fruit, And the commentary read that, by God calling Adam, God calls Adam because Adam and his role is the difference between the garden going the way it should and the garden being the way it shouldn't. Like, he's the difference. And that speaks so much to the power of a man when he's in his frame with God, when he's in step with God. Like, this is you're my governor, like I'm giving this headship to you and I'm with you. And I think the first thing I would walk away with is at least, I don't want to say a plan, but everything I think you do should be to lead your wife and your children well in a way that's God edifying, is to be Christ-like in your love towards your wife, and then to be winsome to your children about the beauty of who God is through Christ in the way that you live. And then the other thing, and this is weird because this is one of those masculine things, but I think it's Paul who says to Timothy, if any man doesn't provide for his own family, he's worse than an unbeliever and has left the faith, right? So the idea of provision being, when I read those as a male, I sat down and said to myself, before I don't take care of my family, I need to walk out of this world. That's something I need to be committed to. And then before I don't have some concept of how we're going to resist the natural flow against the gospel in my household. If you're not standing in the gap in any way, then you kind of abandoned your position, and I think it's a high one.
Yeah. Maybe so cultural masculinity, it's almost like you do what you do and you don't care about the consequences, right?
I think cultural masculinity is Homer Simpson. You know what I'm saying? Doesn't care. Yeah.
Okay,
what's
so
TV, beard is stupid.
Okay. I think that's just the epitome of the American man versus because that would be the actual, but the idea of masculinity would be Schwarzenegger.
It was fun to watch it.
But then again, going to Christianity, it's same thing. You don't care about the consequences, but for different motivation, you're surrendered, right? Whatever it is, it's for the kingdom kind of thing. So right now, and we don't know how it could go, but there's struggles that the church has been dealing with the what's closed and what's open and things like that. And maybe that's the way that you're saying principles that you're not going to let go of and things like that you stand up for, and you don't care. You get whatever you have to do to stand up for the church, stand up for Christ, do those things and not be, just be up, not be reserved, not be quiet, but actually go out there and stand for Christ.
And lead.
Right, lead. And then you can be seen, right, like I said, you have to be in front of people. So to have the actual community of men in the church be able to stand up and, not just be kind of.
I even think there's so much to be said about just this general leading in our families. I think what you just said, Christian, is so good. If I have relinquished the role of discipling my children, I have relinquished the role of being a man. If I've decided that my children, that's my wife's job, that's not my job. That's I've given up biblical manhood. If I've decided that when things go bad, I abandon my faith, I've given up on biblical manhood. I've just given it up. If I decide that I don't want to work, I just want to play video games all day, I've given up biblical manhood. Now, does that not mean that we should not have a moment of relaxation? The thing is, I always feel like I have to put that asterisk there.
Right.
But the fact is that's where the majority of the time is spent for most people.
Right.
So, but maybe just flipping the scene a little bit and going, look, your role as a man is to be a man. And it's so crazy because now I'm getting on my high horse.
Sure, it seems obvious when you say it like that. Your role as a man is to be a man.
Yeah.
But then it's the definition of man.
Right.
What do we define?
We are made to be adventurous, to go after something, to conquer, to win, to rule, to reign, to do something, and because we're afraid and because we can be cowards, we try to find that outlet in safe ways. So how could I rule and reign? Well, I can rule and reign this
World of
avatar
Warcraft.
that I'm moving around, and now I rule and reign this random board. I did it, and if I die,
It's the world putting a cage around you.
but if I die there, then
okay.
there's no consequences.
Yeah.
I don't have to live with the bad decisions I've made. I don't have to deal with that. Or you know what? I'm going to go on adventures and go on through sexual escapades and pornography and things like that. And look, I'm not down on people's struggles. We all have stuff that we got to deal with. But there's a sense that like Satan and Satan, because he is the god of this world, has ripped it from us and has made us a bunch of weaklings. And I don't know. For me, now I'm passionate. Like, I just feel like I can't stand for it. Like, are we going to become a congregation and a world of men that are just so weak-willed? That, I'm all for women leading. Like, come on, like, bring it on, women. But like, men should be like sprinting ahead. And so I don't know.
No, I think what's super, super awesome in what you're saying is like, there is I was thinking about when Jesus was taken to be crucified, and there was like a proverb, or there was a word in the Old Testament that was being fulfilled when it said, "You strike the shepherd and the sheep will scatter," something along those lines. And it's that context of like, when, God forbid, you ever are, like, a man is built as something strong. Like, I was thinking about, I think it's in Corinthians where, like, Paul said, gird your loins up like a man, be strong like a man, be strong and courageous, have not I declared you. And I do think it's
You love the King James,
gird
your loins.
Yes, gird your loins is the best, because, like, it's the idea of, like, you have this robe, and you're tucking the robe in, and that just feels masculine to me, and I don't know why.
Yeah, if you're a woman, you should turn this thing off.
Yeah, exactly right.
Maybe go back 10 seconds and then turn it off. Just forget you've watched Christian do this bizarre action. Is this going to be rated for 18 plus?
We'll do some editing magic right there.
I don't think we should edit it. Just leave it in. Leave it all in. Let's go.
All right.
Gird your loins.
Gird your loins.
If I can rein this back in, though. Right. So, talking about these things, great. In theory, yes. Like, this is what we are meant to be. But what we talked about earlier, it's the practicals, like, of the Christian walk, that it's like, putting it to work, right? What would be that? I mean, we can talk about it all day long, but when it's not like directed in some, then we just, if we're not directing it anywhere, we're just going to continually miss the mark.
Right.
So where are we directing it?
Yeah, I think
right now there actually is an opportunity in kind of what we're talking about, when the church is being, not yet, I wouldn't say like oppressed or anything, but maybe, but when there is like some sort of current that kind of pushes against, like, you should, like you said, sprinting to the front, go to the front and like declare where you stand on that. I don't know if it's social media, what the appropriate ways are to do that, but definitely don't back down. Like, you want to be able to confess the name of Jesus here, so that he's going to confess, vouch for you in front of God.
For sure.
So there's this.
But also to do that in like the appropriate Christian way.
Yeah, totally. I think laced with love.
Laced
right?
with love.
With
nice.
compassion and peace, and that's where we want to be. There's this really cool scene, I think it's in Band of Brothers, where
which one?
Where one of the guys is in a trench, and he says this speech, like, we're about to charge these people, He's the commander. He says this speech, and he finishes the speech, and the camera moves, and all of a sudden, he is the one sprinting, like goodness gracious, like I could like flip the table, like let's go, I'm not just telling you,
right?
I'm doing it,
right?
Like I'm gonna look. I may be the first one shot, but I don't even care.
Like,
right? Let's bring it on.
Right.
I had this courage, so I think practically speaking, lead your family. Lead your family.
Yeah, and I think
like that's one. Yeah. Sorry, you can.
Yeah, no, and I think like it's simpler practically when we actually identify it as something more than an ideal, right? So like there should be, like, your children should be discipled, and you should be planning it. You should have a plan for it. You should be discipling them through, like, the world is happening, coronavirus is happening, music videos and pop culture and social media is all happening. The world is iterating subtly to your children about who they are, who their identity is outside and separate from God, and you should have a plan to do that. You should have a plan to uplift and build up your wife and to support her actively, to look like Christ to her. It's interesting because one of the things Tony said about like all these escapes, right? Like, it's so, I guess, ironic to me that as we think about masculinity in like a biblical way, and as we look at it's, so much of the conversation sounds like people just getting converted the first time, right? Like so much of the conversation is like, what was your life like? Well, a lot of games and like, you know, a lot of girls and we text a lot and like that kind of thing. Like that was my world, right? And then suddenly, like what you're called to do is to flesh out, to be new and to over time look like your master, to pursue your upward calling. And I think, as my experience has personally been, and I think a lot of people may resonate with this, is like the most fulfilling, joyful moments in my life have been my thinking lovingly about how do I flesh out the most loving, Christ-like thing in this situation, and then doing some of that successfully is the best, is being able to say, like, these are the things in Jesus that I think are beautiful. Like, if you're having, like, when you're having a crisis and the boat of your world is being shook, and, like, Jesus wakes up and he stands up and he's like, you have little faith, like, immediately you feel better because he's there in the boat with you, right? Yeah. So, like, in a room where there's turmoil, be the kind of person that makes everyone feel like, oh, thank God Tony's here. Thank God, oh, Shane's here now. Like, okay, like, the situation's not over with, like, the boat's still rocky, but there's a person here who I know is going to take the responsibility from me. I can get behind you. Like, I just don't think it's a coincidence. We're built, like, bigger, wide back. Like, I think the idea of stepping into that uncertainty and giving people hope that, like, I know, like, this is a scary situation, but being for people, like it says in Job, but Job walked in and people celebrated at the gates because he'd built this reputation of saying, like, if you're hungry and I have it for you, like, you're fed now. And I think that's so much of, like, the general practical, one-step idea. Like, what do you need to do? Like, in every room you walk in, not because, you know, you're going to placate to me, but because of what you stand for principally, I'm glad that you're here.
It's like a shelter.
Right.
It's like a shelter
That's
for
exactly
others.
right. That's exactly right.
And
sorry.
well, I was just going to say it's the the running forward. The Jesus is intentional, right? So it's almost like any situation that you'd come to, that it would be with intention. That you take your life, and it's no longer just washing by.
Right.
It's you're kind of being intentional in any situation, able to, like you said, your upward calling, embody be like your master, and then bring that to every situation you come across, so that you're not being as the world and going with the current, but you're changing that as Christ would change that.
Right.
And that would be like you running forward, the metaphor, like going right into battle, like everything that's head on. That's not Christ-like. Like, I'm going to address that.
Mm-hmm. And it's not even about necessarily like dominating.
No.
Because I think that's where
it's standing.
Standing, exactly. I think that's maybe the more beautiful thought, right? It's not like I'm going to dominate my children. Like, that's so stupid. Mm-hmm. Like, how about you stand up for them?
Right.
How about, like, you take, you deal with the suffering that it takes to be a good dad,
right?
Or you deal with the suffering that it takes to be a good provider for your household, or you deal with the suffering, you stand for something, you know, or you go, you know what, the church needs people to help, to volunteer. You know, we always ask for volunteers, like, can anybody help with the kids? You know, and like 100 women would raise their hands, you know, and the guys would just go, you know, like, and we have awesome guys. I mean, a bunch of guys volunteer. Right. We have great guys. Like, if you're a brother
in general,
who's volunteered, I love you.
True.
But
yeah.
but the fact is that, like, more of the people are like, you know, like, but going, okay, I'm going to stand up. I'm going to be a part of this. I'm not going to allow just the women to lead this. Yeah. I'm going to do it too. And I think there's something really passionate about that. But I think, you know, it's funny because someone said to me one time that it's because of the church feels a little bit feminine because of the songs we sing. It's like, Jesus, I love you, whatever. But the fact is, like, I do love Jesus.
Right, you're right.
Like,
I don't know, maybe feel good about that.
Like, maybe we need to sing more marchy songs. Right. Soldiers of Christ arise. You know, like, maybe we need to do that. But I mean, those are such little details within, like, the larger issue, which is how invested is our congregation in elevating and calling men to do what they have been called to do, what they're supposed to do. And especially in this moment in time, like, man, like, it's so easy to be escapism, like to find an escape and just go like, I'm going to live in this escape world. It's so much harder to go, I'm here, I'm present, and I'm going to lead, and I'm going to stand for something.
Yeah, and what you're saying, as you were saying, the qualities of being a father or, you know, a husband, for some reason I'm just thinking of it as like the qualities that God has, right? Well, for some reason, because that's what he calls us to be, you know,
Yeah.
that Christ is the head of the church, you know, be the head of your household. So yeah, like we're suffering, but not in vain. Like, you know, if you're going through tough times, you're suffering for others to benefit, and ultimately yourself as well, and ultimately to glorify God.
Yeah.
So it's that changed perspective. I don't know.
That's good. This is the last question I'll leave us with. As we, I love this context of our discussion.
Yeah, this was really good.
Focusing
This was awesome.
on a discussion about manliness, and I think we don't often have it in this kind of open forum. But as we get through some of this stuff, and as some of the the dominoes fall down, and it looks like, okay, we'll have more of an opportunity to come in. What would you think would be your like shift that you would need to make within your own stance? Like how do you, Shane, how do you, Christian, kind of become the man that you know you ought to be?
I think for me personally, this is weird, but everything said in quarantine is weird. That's what happens in quarantine. Hopefully does not stay in quarantine.
Right.
Yeah, good point.
But the quietness of the time, right? Like I still work a ton, but there's just something about being at home where like literally I have my notebook out while I'm working, and like I've literally just been able to ask myself good questions with my Bible open and get really clear about it. For me, I think the bottom line for me is I believe that the best gifts that I can be to people are all of the things that I find beautiful in Jesus. And it's the strange uniqueness about it is as I pursue, like I feel, so there's things that Jesus does in the gospel that just by reading them make me feel happy. It's just very strange. And like, so he said, like, I am the bread that comes from heaven. And so like literally the thought for me is I want to be bread for my family. Like I want to walk in the door and for Mike to be like, oh, look, the bread's here. You know, like I know my needs are, like I don't think about it, I don't fear for them. I want my wife to feel provided for, cared for, loved, so she doesn't, like she's free to have her thoughts go other places. Like how do I serve the kingdom here? I know we're good, so like her thoughts can move somewhere else. And that's just one example. So for me, it's really been about getting clear about, you know, why Jesus can say, hey, leave your ship on the water, Peter, let's go. And I just follow him. And those are the things that, because they resonate so deeply with me, that I deeply want to be. And that's when I feel fullest as a man. So for me, it really is about getting really clear about specifically how that looks like in the context, those qualities look like in the context of my Mondays for my family. But it's that kind of service that makes me the happiest, and then in turn makes me most valuable for them.
I'm thinking, we were kind of talking before this, I talked about previously, you know, just so much of my mind before all this happened was just wrapped up in work, and it kind of like overtook it. And I just had a couple things pile up on Friday. You know, I haven't been busy for you know, the most part. And then all of a sudden it just seemed like everything was happening. And all of a sudden it was almost like post-traumatic stress. You know, it was like I snapped back there so fast. And I was kind of ashamed, you know, because it's like, you know, we have these conversations and we have all this practical talk we've been having. But then, you know, I got in the weeds, and it was almost like a visceral reaction that I really wasn't happy to see right in front of my face. And was able to kind of think it over a little bit afterwards. And I just don't want that again. I just really want to, and I think maybe it's, I don't think I separate, you know, my Monday through Saturday from Sunday by any means, like as far as like my thoughts and my decision making is there, but I want it to be, you know, intentional. Like we've had the opportunity to do some video work and stuff for the church, and, you know, try and have some influence in the kingdom, for the kingdom. I just want to have a project, whatever our gifts are. I want to like have something I'm working on, because if it's your gift, you're passionate about it, right? And just try and find like an honest way that can be applied to the church, right? So that, and it might not be necessarily involved with the church. Maybe it's just a side idea you had with another disciple or something like that to do something to try and further the kingdom, but something that, whether or not it's like this grand idea, God doesn't start with the grand idea. It's usually these little things that lead into something, and maybe just to try and, start some momentum. And I don't know, I just want to have like a project or something that I try and do something.
Yeah,
that's
awesome.
a very masculine thing to say. So
Yeah,
I appreciate it
yeah,
very
totally.
much. Yeah.
I think the thing I've been really thinking about is I think about the great warriors in God's kingdom and the great warriors even in our world, and I think about the way that they were constantly fine-tuning their skill sets so that they could be more and more effective. And I want to be that. I want to go. I'm sort of a jack of all trades. I could do a little bit of everything, but I want to go. No, I really want to focus in on this, and I want to be great at it. And I want to be so great at it that when God comes back and goes, "Hey, what did you do with the talents that I gave you?" I go, "I certainly didn't dig a hole, and put them in there, and now I'm just giving it back to you. I worked at it, and I multiplied it, and what was given to me is now greater than what was given to me, and that's what I want, and I feel like that's I want to just fine tune it. I want to work on my speaking. I want to work on my communication, my discipling of people, my helping people become Christians. I want to write better and learn to write more. I'd love to write a book. Like there's lots of these little things that I'm like, all right, I'm going to fine tune the skill set so that God can be glorified through it. So when He goes, wow, I gave you these talents. Yeah. What I did with them, God, is I put them to work. I put them to work, and here's something more than what you gave me.
What's
That's
nice
awesome.
about that is it seems like all those were aspects of like there's something that weaves between all those, whatever it's communication, that it's like if you worked on that one thing, because it sounded like you named a couple things, but really they kind of all overlap.
Right, yeah, that was
in one thing.
Yeah.
So, awesome. Well, this has been another great joy that we have being with you and with all of you. It's a blast to talk about these things. If you like these videos or if you like what we're putting together, please subscribe to our channel. Also, you can check us out at browardchurch.org if you'd like to know more information about the church, or if you're ever in Broward County, well, not now, but if you're ever in Broward County when churches are open, please come and check us out in person. We're much better on person than we are on the screen. So I love you. I'm thankful for you. Thankful for you guys.
Yeah,
and we'll see you next time.